what is one of the easiest ways to identify the type of refrigerant in a system? B, check the nameplate data. It'll tell you what it's designed for. So that should be the refrigerant that's in there. By front seating a three-way suction service valve, what do you do when you front seat a three-way suction service valve?
I'm not sure. I think that closes off compressor altogether.
Closes off the compressor. It's D. If you looked at the service, I don't have a marker with me, but if you remember the service valve, if you look at it, and you have the stem sticking up here, when you back that stem clear out, that's back seating it. So you pull that valve clear up here, and you block off the service port. So you can put your gauges on there. When you turn that stem on a little bit, you mid-seat it, you put it down here, you have access now to the service port to put your gauges on it, plus the refrigerant will flow past it and keep on going. When you front seat it, you seat it clear down. You block off going to wherever it's going from there. So pulling it, backing it out is back seating, pushing it forward is front seating, in the middle is mid seated. So it blocks off the port to the inlet of the compressor. At room temperature of 80 degrees, what is the approximate pressure of a cylinder containing R22? A, 143 psi. Which refrigerant may be used as a trace gas pressurized with nitrogen for leak detection?
B.
C. R22 is the only refrigerant you can use as a leak detection gas. And you gotta put nitrogen back behind it. Visual oil traces around the inlet fitting of a sight glass may be the indication of what?
Oil.
A. Oil. Anytime you see oil on a system, there's an indication there's a leak close by there. Because the refrigerant flowing through the system carries oil, and if it slowly leaks out, the oil's going to come out with it, and you'll have an oil spot. What may cause excess of superheat at the evaporator outlet of an air conditioning system?
C.
D. Low refrigerant charge. Remember, if your superheat is high, your charge is low. If your superheat is low, your charge is too high. What's the maximum leak rate allowed for comfort cooling chillers and all other equipment that require repair under EPA regulations?
A.
15%. Just remember, comfort cooling, air conditioning is comfort cooling. Chiller is an air conditioner. And it's 15% for comfort cooling. Processed equipment is 35%. What the required level, and this question is confusing.
Yeah.
And they will write confusing questions that you got to think about it to figure them out. The required level of evacuation for recovery equipment manufactured before November 15th, 1993 is less than that required for equipment manufactured after that date. What is the early requirement when used on a system with an R22 charge of less than 200 pounds?
4.
A.
It's 0. It's A. They're looking for equipment manufactured before 1993. And when you're talking R22 equipment, less than 200 pounds, before 93 and after 93 doesn't matter. It's both 0. So I just told you the answer to 9. What's the required level of evacuation for recovery equipment manufactured after November 15th, 1993 on a system that contains less than 200 pounds of R22?
B.
A, it's zero.
Zero.
If it's less than 200 pounds, doesn't matter if it was manufactured before or after, they're both zero. 10, they're not dealing with anything with R12 anymore, because R12 has been banned for the last 10 years, and I don't think there's any of it in existence anymore being used. There's probably still some out there, but not being used anywhere. What's the maximum annual leak rate for industrial, process, and commercial refrigeration equipment required to be repaired under EPA regulations?
35.
C, 35%. Which of the following replacements is defined as a major repair by the EPA?
C.
C.
It's C. It's both a compressor and an evaporator is a major repair. The other one is condenser, and a metering device. I mean, if you've got to open the system up, they consider that a major repair.
That's not metering device.
Hmm?
That is not, metering device is not, instead of zero,
But a metering device is there too. It's not on that sheet, but a metering device is also, anytime you gotta open that system up, and you got to repair a metering device, you got, unless you're gonna take just the head of it off, put a new head on. But if you're gonna replace a metering device, you gotta open the system up. Anytime you open it up, that's a major repair. Doesn't matter if you gotta change the dryer. Dryer doesn't do anything other than clean the refrigerant up, but if you gotta change that dryer, you've gotta open the system up. That's a major repair. By EPA rules, a type 2 classification applies to what?
D.
D, split air conditioning systems with 5 pounds or more of refrigerant. Technically, it can be A also, because they're making small air conditioners, less than 5 pounds, with 410 in them. And that's a very high pressure system. And you've gotta be a type 2 certification to work on very high pressure. So, you could probably get away with both answers, would be acceptable. It was only just air conditioning until 410 refrigerant came out. Most liquid refrigerants can be removed from the system. Most liquid refrigerants to be removed from the system will be found in what?
B.
It's really B, the receiver. That's where the majority of your refrigerant's gonna be. That's just a big open cylinder that's gonna hold the liquid refrigerant. There will be liquid refrigerant in the condenser, but there's gonna be more of it in the receiver. It's the owner's responsibility to maintain records of any and all refrigerant that is added to a system that contains blank pounds of refrigerant or more.
D.
D, contains 50 pounds of refrigerant or more.
And it doesn't say that like that in the paperwork, but it's the only way that makes sense to me.
Right, yeah, it doesn't say it in there, but it is, because if it's more than 50 pounds of refrigerant, you've gotta get it repaired. If it's a leak rate is a certain percentage, it has to be repaired. If it's under 50 pounds of refrigerant, they really don't care. Why maintain a record? I mean, it'd be nice to know if you were the owner, how much you're putting into it, but they don't require you to. System-dependent recovery equipment is limited to appliances containing less than blank pounds of refrigerant. A, 15 pounds of refrigerant.
I don't understand that one, but that's what I put down, that's what it says in the paperwork.
Right. And again, I've never seen a system-dependent recovery system. I don't even know if they have them in existence anymore. All I know is Jerry didn't cross it off the list, so they must still be asking questions about it. What? Huh? The answer is A, 15 pounds of refrigerant. There are exceptions to the required evacuation levels for recovery equipment that require an appliance to be evacuated to only 0 PSI.
C.
A,
The defective
It's,
compressor.
it's B.
B.
If it's got contaminants in the system, it's gonna damage your recovery equipment. If it's a defective compressor, because defective compressors, when they're talking about system dependent at 0 PSI on a defective compressor. Right? Doesn't say anything about system dependent here, it just says limited to the required evacuation levels of recovery equipment. So I would assume at that point there we're talking a recovery machine. And if it requires you to go to 0 PSI, but if you've got a burnout compressor and there's acid in that refrigerant, you don't pull that back into your recovery machine and burn up
Yeah.
$1,000 machine, you know. What's the rule for the maximum liquid filling of a refrigerant cylinder?
C.
C, 80%. What refrigerant would you expect to find in a split system air conditioning manufactured before 1995? R22, C. R11 and R22 are ultra low temperature refrigerants, and so is 502. So you're not gonna see anything but 22 in it. How is time required for recovery of refrigerant shortened?
C.
C,
C, remove as much liquid as you can, and you cool the recovery tank. If you cool the recovery tank, you can put more into it faster, the pressures will drop down. What is the condition and state of refrigerant entering the receiver?
C,
I said D, but I'm not sure, because it doesn't really say on the paperwork.
Well, the receiver is right after the condenser. So what's the state of the refrigerant after it comes out of the condenser?
liquid,
Subcooling, low pressure liquid.
It's a subcooled, high-pressure liquid. So it'd be D. When it comes out of the condenser, it's a high-pressure liquid that's been subcooled. In what units is a deep vacuum for evacuation or dehydration measured?
D,
D, microns.
That's what we were talking about.
That's what I was talking about. They're gonna wanna know, and it'll be worded all different kinds of ways, but when they talk about pulling a vacuum and how they want it measured, they want it measured in microns. Any non-condensables in a refrigeration system will do what?
C.
is it B?
It's B. It'll cause an increase in the high-pressure side. You can't purge it with a recovery machine. You're just gonna suck it out with a recovery machine, so you can't purge it. So it wouldn't be A or B, or neither A or B. It would be B. It just causes a high-pressure side to arise, because a non-condensable is like nitrogen. It doesn't switch back and forth between a gas and a liquid, it just stays a vapor. And when you get that mixed in with your refrigerant, your high pressure side goes way high. R134 is a drop-in replacement refrigerant for what?
D,
D.
D. Still, there are no drop-in replacements. What's the condition and state of refrigerant leaving the accumulator?
B,
Now, the accumulator is what's on a heat pump, and it's right before the compressor, suction, the inlet of the compressor.
That would be a high pressure.
Superheated.
No,
Vapor.
superheated,
it would be
low
a
pressure.
superheated, low-pressure vapor. It'd be B. When it leaves your evaporator, it's coming from the evaporator, it's low pressure and it's a vapor. and it's superheated. It's a low, in the wintertime, it's a low pressure saturated vapor that's semi-superheated. Okay, comes into your accumulator, turns into more vapor there, and drawn back into the compressor. So it's a low pressure superheated vapor out of the accumulator. The accumulator and the receiver, but everybody always gets mixed up.
Yeah.
Just think about it as a receiver. It's receiving that refrigerant from the condenser. All right. An accumulator, you're wanting that refrigerant to boil off and vaporize. So you're just accumulating refrigerant in there to boil off. I mean, it's everybody gets them mixed up.
Yeah, I've always had a hard time with that one.
Yep. But you just got just remember that the receiver is coming out of the condenser.
So the receiver and accumulator is almost the same thing, it's just a little.
Well, yes and no. The receiver is meant to store refrigerant
Yeah,
because depending on what your system is and how it reacts with different temperatures, at one temperature you may need more refrigerant than another temperature. So your receiver takes that liquid refrigerant and just stores it in there. Your accumulator has that little J tube in there,
okay,
so that it keeps the refrigerant.
from migrating.
Well, yeah, it keeps the refrigerant as a liquid down here, but lets it boil off and sucks that vapor off back to the compressor. So you don't have liquid going into your compressor. Your receivers typically lay flat.
No, I think you said the two, that makes more sense to me.
Right. And your receivers just lay flat,
Yeah.
and accumulators stand up and down, straight up and down. Which of the following will speed up a recovery process?
See,
C, chilling the recovery vessel and heating the appliance up. Okay? How'd y'all do?
Sir.
You good? No? No comments? It's all right, we'll go over type 3 here today. I'm looking at the schedule, so we'll do type 3 today. We'll come in next week and we'll take a type 3 test. And then after that test, we'll review core through 3. The following week, we'll come in, we'll take the entire test. And then I'll take that home with me and grade it, because you got spring break the next week. So I'll grade, pardon? No. You got today's the 25th, and we took the type 2. On the 4th, we're gonna take the type 3. On the 11th, we'll take the entire test, and then the 18th is spring break.
But that's when we're gonna take.
Yeah, it's all right.
We'll take the entire test on the 11th.
And then he's gonna take it on.
And I'll take it home and I'll grade it, just so you know where you're at. Then you'll have spring break, then we'll come back in, and we'll take like the whole test again, the core through 3. I'll give you time to study on them. And then we'll just keep doing tests. We'll do like core and 1, and then 1 and 2, and 2 and 3, and then core and 3 through 3 again. And just keep doing repetition. So let me pass these out.
Take a quick break? Can we take a quick break?
Sure.
How about a long break?
What time is it?